Abhi is a first-year MBA student at Michigan Ross and a former consultant at a boutique consulting firm looking to get interviews for top strategy consulting firms like Bain, McKinsey, and BCG. In this extreme consulting makeover, January reviews his resume and shares tips to increase his chances of getting an interview. January is a former Bain consultant and has edited thousands of resumes specific for consulting firms. If you're an MBA candidate looking to break in, join our Black Belt program for expert help. Link in the show notes to learn more. In addition, we'd love to have you live for our next Extreme Consulting Makeover session. These happen on Tuesdays at 12 Eastern. Links in the show notes for all this. All right, let's get into the show.
For everybody who's on the call and joining us for your first Extreme Consulting Makeover, I just want you to know this is not just about the resume. And as you're going to see with what we do with Abhi today, we're going to actually talk about the whole process. So I'm going to use the resume as an anchor point, Abhi, for you. But not everything that we're going to talk about is the resume, because I picked up on one thing that you said earlier, which is that you just really want to, make sure that you're optimizing everything for the process, not just your resume. You want interviews, and so I want to make sure that if there's anything else that we can do to ensure that you have the best possible chance to get the interviews that you really want, that we are thinking through that. So you mentioned that you're a first year at Ross. Wonderful. Congratulations. Great school. Amazing opportunity. Ross, again, for those of you who are joining us that aren't from Ross or don't know, is a target school for many, many consulting firms. It's one of the top target schools in the United States for consulting. And so you're going to have a lot of folks that are coming to campus. So we're going to talk a little bit about the story first, and then we're going to talk about how you apply that story through the touch points that you'll have with the firms. And I kind of get into a groove sometimes, so I will try to come up for air and make sure that I am getting your feedback, your insight. There are going to be things that I will ask, whether they're missing or whether they're in here. But first, before I dive into the details of your resume, I just want to take what you said and highlight how a firm is going to think about you from the beginning, right? So they're like, okay, so he has consulting experience. So clearly, if he's applying for consulting jobs, he likes consulting, right? That's kind of one of the first check boxes that you have. However, you have consulting experience in India. So one of the questions is going to be cultural fit and location, right? So tell me a little bit about where you might be wanting to work, because I'm sure that's going to be a question that will be on the firm's minds as well.
In US and particularly in Chicago.
Okay, great. And so when you know where you want to go, it makes it a lot easier from a recruiting perspective. There may be opportunities on the margins, Abhi, just to keep yourself open to. If you know, if you have family in Chicago, or you are 100% certain that you have to go to Chicago, that's one thing. If you're like, I would prefer Chicago, but I'm 1% open or 5% open to other places, I want to give you a few options for other places that you might want to reach out to too. Which category are you? 100% Chicago or 90% Chicago?
So I was thinking about 70% Chicago, 15% Detroit, 15% San Francisco.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, great. So, and I want to add actually like Austin or a couple of the Texas offices onto your list just based on your background. And then in addition, it might seem like it's very unusual, but Miami actually might be an interesting place for you to look as well. So anyhow, and let me give you some context behind that, and then I want to go through the background, because when you say, I came from India, I'm assuming you're probably going to want to do something in tech. And so we want to look for places where tech talent migration is happening. And in the United States, San Francisco is still the hub. It's the big mama of technology, but because of taxation and because of labor markets, we're seeing a pretty big dramatic shift to Texas and to Southern Florida for tech hubs. And neither one of them are San Francisco yet, but we are seeing a significant amount of engineering and building and hiring. And that means that these tech ecosystems are developing, and consulting firms are followers of ecosystems, right? And so, but many of the consulting firms now have not just a Dallas office, which they've had for a while, or maybe a Houston office, but they've actually opened up an Austin office. And so those new open offices have fewer legacy relationships with schools, and fewer, there'll be just like a smaller group of people. So they are more open to inbound hiring than they are necessarily to their traditional hiring. Miami has always been it's like a combination of a really hardcore office for some firms and a party office for other firms. And so this addition of tech is really adding a spice and a flavor to the Miami office. But similar, there aren't any, like there's no Ross in Florida that is the equivalent of the volume of hiring into consulting like a Target school would have. And so you have the brand name behind you, but then if you kind of go outside of the pool where everybody else is looking, you might find yourself in uncharted territory. It might be unfriendly waters, but it might be actually really great opportunities. And so you have a window now before applications drop in the next 4 weeks where opening up some of those conversations would be amazing. And your best link 100% of the time is going to be somebody who went to Ross, right, first. If they didn't go to Ross, but were at Accenture or ZS, which you can kind of filter for on LinkedIn, that would be another pool of people. And then otherwise, it's just folks that are in the post-MBA roles, maybe a little bit more senior, 2 to 3 years out. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about that process a bit more in a minute. But the one thing that I just want to say, when I get a background like yours, and I'm like, okay, competent in consulting, great, right? Interested in working in US, fantastic, right? You know, this is normal. No traditional barriers. You're coming often to a US business school because this is something that you would want to do. It's not a big surprise to me. We don't want to have the sponsorship conversation too early, right? So what we need to highlight for you is why you're different than all the other people who did tech or consulting in India and why you're coming to the US. And so I'm going to look for that on your resume. And if I don't find it, that's going to be one of the gaps that I really want to make sure that we highlight. So if you're, do you have any kind of questions about what I've talked about so far? Otherwise, I'd like to dive into the resume.
No, this helps a lot. And thank you for sharing these new geographies. I'll definitely explore them. So no questions allowed.
Great. So now let's go down through the resume. Why don't you just page down kind of just really quickly so we can get a sense of it. So right, 2 educational experiences, MBA and undergrad. We've got Accenture strategy, ZS associates for the work experience, promoted at ZS, which is a great sign. Awesome. No other experience on top of that. But there are these kind of additional pieces. Right. And so I want to highlight a few of these things. So first of all, your format is very Ross dictated. I get that. So usually in Extreme Consulting Makeover, I'll highlight format changes, but I'm only going to highlight 2 here that I really want to highlight. One, and they're within the Ross format. One is that you have way too many bullet points under each one of your experiences. I do not want to read these bullet points. I don't actually want to read, when you give me this many bullet points, I don't want to read anything. And so you are dissuading me from engaging with your content because of the like overall perception of this word wall that I'm getting. So we've got 2 choices with that. One is that we can highlight, and I did this on my Bain resume when I was applying for my first jobs after Bain. It kind of is funny. I never got hired again because I just started my own companies after that. But I did the resume exercise at least, and so there were a few things inside there that like I would highlight the name of the industry, right? So pharma, and that is one thing that can actually help your conversations pop so that you have like your pharma experience. And I'm just going to highlight it here, right? You've got some things that are internal. Looks like the India Climate Club and ZS blockchain are internal. You might want to highlight that as an internal thing. You've got existing drug post new launch, pharma firm. I don't know if those are the same firm. You've got product features for top biopharma firm, Canadian pharma firm. I mean, ZS does a lot of obviously like pharma, healthcare, and life sciences. So you might even want to be, you might want to specify biopharma, like large pharma, right? You might want to kind of get even a little bit more detailed if all of the experiences are for different clients with the same. And so that's kind of the first thing, US life sciences firm, right? Like, and really giving me some more context. What you've done really well here is highlight, some of the high level things, but anyhow, we have to pull that out, maybe italicize it at the beginning of some of those bullet points. And what you're going to want to do is group just like a single client project, or pick a single client highlight for each one of them. So you don't want to have 2 or 3 client highlights. If this represents, 6 different clients, we actually want to show that you worked for 6 different clients. Scroll up really quickly to your work with Accenture as well. Yeah, so you've got UAE Bank, Saudi Bank, UAE Bank. I don't know if, again, those are the same ones. Swedish Telecom. So here you have even more variety. So then the sum of your resume, instead of being consulting, is the industries that you've worked for. And that gives you new talking points when you're reaching out to somebody. You can reach out to a partner in pharma if you're interested in healthcare in the future. You can reach out to a partner in financial services, but you have to call it out on the resume. You can't rely just on your external networking to do that. So I'd want that stuff to become more evident. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 is that you highlight in your bullet points, you restrict each of your entries to a maximum of 3 to maybe 4, but like 3 is kind of the max bullet points. One of them is your overall, like the overall projects that you did, the number of projects, the size of teams, just kind of like a description of a standard project role. For yes, you'd want to highlight that you got promoted, right? Like you'd want to put that in your first bullet point, and then you have your other bullet points would be 1 bullet point per client, and you would bold inline the clients, right? So it would be, so then as I scan down, I can see what it is, but I don't really care. Honestly, Abhi, I mean, and this is going to be tragic for you potentially, but I don't really care that you did 6 different things at Accenture. Like, I kind of know what Accenture does, right? I care who you worked for at Accenture, and I care how many different projects you did. That's basically it.
Sure.
And the same with ZS. So we're looking for unique and different types of things, but that's just about it. What I think we need in here is something other than consulting. So do you have an internship experience, a startup experience, or kind of anything else that we could highlight here that would give me color, that would be that guy who did tech in India plus, right? And because that's really what I'm going to look for here is for you to distinguish yourself amongst not just, remember, your other classmates, but everyone else who's applying at the MBA level at the same time.
Are you targeting firms like McKinsey, Bain, Deloitte, BCG, or Accenture? Then join our Black Belt program. Black Belt is a structured case prep program that combines expert coaching with a self-paced prep curriculum. You'll get 8 hours of one-on-one coaching with a former McKinsey, Bain, or BCG consultant, and unlimited digital materials and homework will assign you in between sessions to accelerate your progress. And finally, resume and cover letter edits to ensure you get the interview. 80% of Black Belts who complete the program land at least 1 offer inside consulting. If you're ready to land your offer and change your career trajectory, join Black Belt today. Link in the show notes to learn more. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you ever heard a new digital trend and thought to yourself, okay, does this really matter? Asking the right questions helps you cut through the noise and get down to what matters most. I'm Jim Hertzfeld, host of the What If, So What podcast, where we discover what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real by asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? Subscribe and listen, and together we can turn big ideas into tangible actions so you can get shit done.
So I have 2 internships, although I haven't included them. One was a 6-month long internship with a travel software firm called MEDS Labs. And the other one was with one of the biggest telecom providers in India, Reliance Jio. So yeah, I have two experiences, but yeah, maybe if I reduce the points, I can bring them up.
Yeah, because remember, right now, if I look at ZS, I don't read any of it, not even 1 bullet point. So I skipped the whole thing. You might as well have something else on there for me to read.
No,
and then it kind of rounds out your story a little bit. So yeah, I would probably, I know they're older, but again, there's a couple rules when you're thinking about what to put on or take off your resume. One is, are you going to talk about it in the interview? So if you're ever going to bring that stuff up, then put it on there, right? Because I want you to talk about it. And the second is if it does this, if it kind of adds color to show that you have been successful in other environments. Like if you did those internships and got an offer to return, if you did different kind of work there, if you worked for a different kind of division, if it kind of rounds out the overall experience and helps explain a little bit more about who you are, that can be powerful. Are you doing anything while you're at Ross? I know you're really early there, but like we have a program called Strategy Sprint. We'll talk about that, I think, after we go through everything, but it's a 1 week project. It's a consulting project, and it kind of is like that would be a US based experience for you. That also might be something really powerful to add on there. And so if not necessarily Strategy Sprint, if you're not able to do that, but something like that might be a good fit for centralizing your US experience. Yeah. So anything on that you want to highlight?
As a hobby, I've been going to a lot of hackathons in the US and also while I was in India and UAE. So I won a lot of those. So I wanted to highlight that in my additionals. I don't know if you would qualify this as a different color.
Well, so let me double check something right now. I think for Ross, they don't have a leadership section, right? They just have the additional section. Do you have the option to, because in many B school resumes, there's education, experience, leadership, and then like additional or other or personal at the bottom. But I think at Ross, am I right?
Selected. So we have a Ross. In my Ross, you have a selected where you can highlight some of the positions that you're leading at Ross.
Yeah, but it's not a separate section. It's
not
just
a
bullet
separate
point. Yeah, okay. Because that's where I would kind of put the hackathons. And so we can go through the bullet points now, but I think basically what we're talking about in the big shape is I think you need a few of those other things. So let's talk about, I would recommend putting one or maybe both of those experiences on there, because I think you're going to want to bring them up. You're not that old, right? You graduated in 2018. So it's not like this experience is 15, 25 years ago. And so those experiences of 7 or 8 years ago when you were still in school, great, put them on there. I think they're going to add something to your resume. Your resume, by the way, is really good. So this is a fun one for me to do, because sometimes I work with resumes where I'm like, okay, change everything. I'm not going to say that to you. But what I am going to say is what I'm going to receive and really try to help you hone that. So that was the first thing, was format. Was just like, okay, we've got these big word walls. We need to really think about that. The second is structure, which we really can't change because it's a Ross format. And so it's not like we can move something into one section or out of another. So I'm going to spend the majority of the time on the third piece that we do in our resume edits, which is content. And I'm going to walk through that now. Okay, let me pause for just a second. Any other questions before I dive into the actual like line by line content?
I actually hear your point on the word wall. In fact, when even I look at my resume, I don't want to read it.
Oh no, this is bad news.
Because so many words at once thrown at you. So one way you mentioned about highlighting or it like bolding things up. Any other suggestion that you would give me on that? Because we can't bold in the Ross format. So just wanted to know.
Yeah. No, we're gonna basically add more stuff on. So there are fewer things, and then we're gonna use maybe a little bit of that like the bolding or the italicizing, whatever we're able to do. And then we're going to just pick, like, that's the hardest thing to do when you have more experience and you feel like, gosh, I wonder if this one thing is going to make the difference. It won't. Whether they read it or not makes the difference. Right.
Right.
And so I think like one of the things that we do is we go really into the details, but the most important thing I think we do is that we zoom out and we say, okay, are they going to read it or not? Right now, they're not going to read it. So we can't give them a resume they're not going to read. That's not going to be, that's not going to serve the purpose. So we need first of all, a resume they're going to read. It's got to be a little shorter in terms of the details. So let's go through some of the kind of fun points here. So, right, you got an MBA, STEM designated, April 2025, amazing, right? Great GMAT score. Love to see that. Anytime a GMAT's over 700, especially over 720, we'd always want you to pop that on there. The emphasis in strategy and digital is fine. These members of the different clubs. When you say, what's the difference between member and selected in Ross language?
Member is you're part of that club. Selected as you take a leadership position in those clubs. So.
I see. Okay, great. So if I'm not at Ross, then you'll just have to explain that to me, right?
Understood.
But if there's any way that you can add a little bit more detail, like, at Ross Student Ambassador, you're like one of 20. Right? Education director at the healthcare club, right? Membership 300 or something like that, right? So if there's some way that you can kind of add any data in there. Yeah. And then I also wouldn't put in the healthcare club on your member Again, because we're trying to
okay.
get to readability, but if I know that you're a leader in a club, I'm going to assume you're also a member. So like, we don't have to add that in there as well. Yeah. And then you can take out, this is like a really small point, you can take out the ampersand before the India club. Like you can just put the list of the clubs with commas in between them. As a reader, I can compute that without the end there.
Okay.
Okay. When you're looking at your, your backgrounds, right? Institute of Engineering and Technology, you got your Bachelor of Engineering, your GPA is great, obviously, right? Co-president of the tech club, but this is the kind of thing that I really like here, where you are giving more detail into a specific leadership position. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about, the selected, but just having like a little bit more detail in there. I think that experience, like those two experiences, unless there's something missing, are actually pretty strong. So I really want to spend the majority of my time in your additional and your experience section. Any questions about education before we move on?
No.
Great. Let's go down to the bottom first. Let's go to the additional section. I always like to tackle this one. You've got this nonprofit innovation lead. When and where was that? It's a little bit out there. Like it's interesting, but I don't have any anchor to where that fits in your story.
So it's a US-based nonprofit, and I've been working on it while I was working at ZS and Accenture. So I'm still working with them, but it's a—
What's the name of it?
It's called Shooting Stars Foundation. It's a US-based, California-based nonprofit.
So I would probably try to highlight you've got some what I would call fluffer or buffer language in here that doesn't add any value, but I think the context of that organization would. So if you're right, if you kind of like highlight the name of it, it makes me want to read the next part. And then you just like put in parentheses, right? Like nonprofit innovation lead, and then raise 300K. But I don't need to know that it's a new tech hackathon. Most hackathons are. I don't need to know that you sponsored the graduate education. You can just say sponsored grad education of over 400. I don't need to know that they're underserved students, right? Students in India and Africa, right? So I think you can take out some of that fluffer language and put in more of what I really want to read about. So I think that's going to be an important key there. The Tony Stark fan is like a funny thing to read, but then I actually don't know. I feel like a little silly, but I don't know why that means that you won, when you say that I won the 9 hackathons, but you're a Tony Stark fan. What does that mean?
No, so the intent was to make it more funny so that there's this likability perspective, but Tony Stark comes from the tech part of it, the Iron Man part of it, and then 9 hackathons comes from the technology part of it. But if it's not funny, then I will remove it. So
yeah. I think what you're highlighting here is the roles, and what's actually more interesting is just like hackathon enthusiast, right? Or something like that. And then like the speaker, right? IBM's, I would have like IBM's AI and World Bank Summit, like presented twice on Tech for Good to 3,000 attendees. I'd flip around what you're highlighting at the beginning of those sentences, because I don't think the fact that you were a speaker matters. I think the fact that it was at IBM's, whatever, the foodie, I don't even know what it means to be ranked the top 5% of dessert eaters. I feel like that's a very specific Indian thing that you would like, everyone is so competitive that you would be in the top 5% of dessert eaters. But I have no idea how you came to that metric. So it's kind of funny, but I think like the part that's really interesting is the 100+ green tea varieties. Like that part I would actually highlight. So I think you're highlighting the opposite of the thing that I would think is interesting when I'm reading through this. And then the soccer fan I think is funny too, but I don't know if you're able to within the Ross format, but I always just like a general interests line. If you're like, right, and in there, I find it easier to digest in the way that you have this here. Something like dessert, right? One of my interests is dessert, right? Top 5% of dessert eaters in India, right? Green tea, like sampled 100+ varieties, right? Soccer fan, love, right? Like kind of like highlighting just a few little snippets, but putting them all together. Because this, for me, again, it feels a little bit more like a word wall. It's too much for me to actually digest what's funny or interesting about it. And there may be other things in there, hiking or traveling or something else that might bring out some other color. Overall, like the things are kind of interesting, but the way that they're presented is almost like
Okay.
too dense for me to engage with. So it's kind of the opposite of what some people might say, but leave a little bit there to be desired.
Sure.
All right, we already talked about kind of adding, 2 experiences in your work experience section, and then trimming up some of these. So let's just talk about one of them in particular. Let's go to the Accenture one, because that's kind of bite-sized, and I think if we get that one right, it'll be easier. So all of these are really project-based, right? Like all of them are your specific different projects. And so if you're going to have one line that highlights the kind of overall work that you did at Accenture, what would you say it would be?
Worked with top Middle Eastern banks, help them answer some of their strategic.
Great. How many top Middle Eastern banks?
Four banks, yes.
Great, right? So completed 4 engagements with top Middle Eastern banks on like whatever, right? On tech, like, tech innovation, revenue generation, like whatever the kind of big business areas were that you were working on with them. I think that would be really helpful as an entree, because then if I'm reading the first line, if I start reading this one, I'm like, oh no, this is it, right? This is like really a lot of stuff, and I don't really care about firm-wide governance. Like I'm bored the first few lines. So grab me with that kind of overall context statement. Try to fit it on one line. If you can't, give me 2 lines. So then the maximum number of bullets that we'd have after that are 4.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So pick 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then pick one of them that you're going to include in there. And then let's just talk about how I would kind of reshape that a little bit.
I think I would remove the Swedish telecom one.
Great.
2, 3, 4, and probably the last one. Yeah, these 2.
Okay, perfect. And so let's just do the let's do the first one, because I don't like that bullet and I want to make it better. So stagnant UAE bank, right? You cut $500 million from the budget. I think that's the most important thing, right? So reduced UAE bank's budget by 500 million. Like, give me that right away.
Okay.
And because I care less about the activities and more about the action. So usually when you're telling a story, you're going to tell me, here was the problem, here's what we did, here was the action. But in great resume bullets, you'll often flip that around, where you tell me the result was this, and here's how I got there, right? And so you might want to do that repetitively throughout the other bullet points, because that might really transform the way that they're portrayed. So cut $500 million from UAE bank's budget by, and then like tell me what you did, right? If it was a 4-month engagement or a 6-month engagement, you interviewed 2,000 people. Like, give me an anchoring around the action that you took, and you can put the 45%, by the way, in parentheses after that. So I think that would help something like this.
So what you're saying is the most impactful stuff should come up front
first.
Yeah. Okay. For it to be
even though it makes sense telling the story this way, remember, I'm bored. I'm a bored 5-second reader, and so you got to grab my attention as fast as you can. And if you cut $500 million from a budget, I'm like, wow, that's pretty legit, right? And so so anyhow, you'll have to think about how you actually want to retell some of those stories. But if you have the choice between telling me 3 things that you did, instituted firm-wide governance, value realization, and transparency, that are intangible, I'd rather not hear about any of them. Like, try cutting all of that language out of your document and just tell me, I interviewed 1,000 people and cut 500 million from the budget. That's it. Right? I conducted a 4-month survey of X, Y, and Z personnel activities and cut 500 million from the budget. Like, I don't really need to know the topic areas that you covered. It's too ambiguous. And I can't get a picture of it. So you're trying to give me the maximum amount of concrete information and the minimum amount of stuff that I have to interpret, or that I might think of in 3 different ways.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Hey, you. Yeah, you listening. Do you like personal finance or real estate? Are you itching to build wealth and create a better life for yourself or your family? Then you need to come check out the Life, Money, and More podcast with real estate agent, YouTuber, and actor Sage Weiss. This isn't your average finance show. We dive deep and do not sugarcoat topics around money and life. The Life, Money, and More podcast releases 2 episodes a week just for you, because we're all about helping you win in this crazy world we live in. Come join the thousands of listeners on the Life, Money, and More podcast.
We'll be right back after this quick break. Every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we run an Extreme Consulting Makeover. What is this? Well, it's a live 1-hour Q&A session where we workshop 2 consulting candidates' resumes and we answer your questions live. Click the link in this episode's show notes to register for an upcoming Extreme Consulting Makeover and to apply to have your resume workshop in front of a live audience. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Okay, let's pause for a second. Let's zoom back out to the big picture, right? So now that I know a little bit more about what you did, lots of banks and Accenture, lots of pharma, and ZS, is there one or the other areas or a third area that is not one of those 2 that you'd really like to focus on after
The
your
digital
MBA?
side of things. So the digital side,
For everybody or digital in one of those specific areas?
digital for anyone. Yeah.
Digital
the digital
transformation. Great.
Yeah.
Who are your top firms that you're targeting?
For BCG, McKinsey, and B. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Are you open to some of the others?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So what you'll need is 2 people that you've talked to at every firm that you're open to.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to make sure that you highlight the parts of you that go way beyond your digital and your transformation experience, the pieces at the bottom. So tell me something fun about you.
No, this is a tough question to answer, but
it should be the easiest question to answer. This should be like a laundry list of ideas.
no, I think this has been the hardest question to answer me before, but something that I can recall is I've been a soccer fan for about now 10, 15 years, a big Cristiano Ronaldo fan. So I follow all 5 European soccer leagues and like very up to date with it. So yeah, this is what I enjoy. And I don't know if that's
Amazing.
fun. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so like you should go to Miami, right?
Yeah,
like Miami is the hub of soccer right now in the US. And so so those are reasons why you should reach out. And like when you're networking with people, don't just answer their questions. Answer questions with a question. Just say, do you want to know the real reason or the professional reason why I want to go to Miami, right? Like I want to go to Miami because of soccer. Like everything that's happening in the world for soccer is happening in Miami right now. Okay, but the professional reason is this, it's different in the US than in your Indian context. I don't need to know that you're going to come and stay forever. I don't need to know that you're the best in your class. I need to know that I like you the most, because when I put you in front of a client, they're going to buy because they like you. Because they've got 20 choices. It's just our market is in many ways less developed, right? It's like less specialized and more general. And because of that, the personality that you convey is actually going to be super important. And so yeah, I'm glad I put Miami on the list because I feel like you should go to Miami now. But make sure that people want to talk to you, not because you're going to be like a good analyst. Because one of the risks that you have when you come from this background, when you come from consulting in general, is that they know you're going to like it, but they don't know if you're going to love it, right? They know you can do it, but they're not sure you're going to thrive. They're not so sure sometimes that you even know how to thrive. And so they have to see that you have the ability to really make that extra special interpersonal connection. And that's what networking is going to do for you. So don't keep the conversation on the transaction, have it on, and just say like, could you go back? Like, could you go back to India and go back to Accenture or go back to ZS? Would they take you back?
No, they don't sponsor international applicants over here. They would.
No, but would they take you back?
They would. I mean, I mean, I don't get your question completely.
So one of the things that helps people answer the why do you want to do this is if you're like, look, like I could go back to India and I could work for Accenture or I could work for ZS again, but here's why I don't want to. Like get super real with them, right? I want to work here on this because,
Understood.
and it has to have an emotional component to it, right? Because like what they do is at this level, what you do is at this level. Like you have to think about really how you're going to communicate that.
Okay.
And it's not like I want to work on these projects with you. It's the characteristics. It's the generalization of why you could do that. It's open to you. You did well. You could go back any day, but you're looking forward, and this is where you think the future is going, and this is what you want to be a part of, right?
So to summarize, I hear a few things. One is this readability aspect of the resume. Second is this personality part of the resume. So it's clearly lacking of personality. I need to work on that. And third is the reasoning of whys, right? Why you, maybe that could come more from conversations rather than resume.
Exactly. Yeah, you're gonna have to get on the phone with them, and so you can't say, "Look at my resume."
Yeah.
You have to say, you know, I'm looking to be in a like tech forward innovation hub because I want to be a part of building the firm's like tech practice over the next decade. And so I just want to have a conversation with you about whether or not you think I'm a good fit. And by the way, I've mentioned this on other calls, but in case you haven't been here, 100% of the time, tell them you're applying. Like say, I'm applying for an internship.
Sure.
Not I'm thinking about applying or I'm exploring. Because when you're applying, they're like, oh boy, you know, we're going to jump on the phone with them more likely, but we're also worried if it's going to be a disaster. So, so we get excited when you're in the zone. That's one of the reasons why we picked your resume for this feature today.
Sure. Okay. Understandable. This helps me a lot.
Good. Okay. So yeah, basically all I said was rewrite your resume, think about totally different offices, tell your bullets in a different way, you know, add some stuff on there. It did kind of become a makeover, even though a lot of the core structural pieces, I wouldn't have said that this is a bad resume. I just think that you, Abhi, are more than this, and you need to portray that in your documents.
Understood. I just had one final question. So for some things like a fast track promotion or things like that, do I include it besides the role so that it's more clearer for them to understand? Or if I was the youngest consultant at Accenture, do I bring them up or
in your first line? In the first line.
In the first line.
As youngest consultant accepted to Accenture, completed 4 projects with Middle Eastern banks, right?
Understand. Okay. Yeah. I just don't want to sound like more of a bragging or
Yeah, so bragging is I was the best ever, which nobody ever told you, or like no one else was as good as me. That's like bragging actually sounds absurd, right? You need to tell them that you were distinguished. How else will they know?
Understood. Okay, perfect. This helps a lot.
You were the top 5% of dessert eaters. You have to be able to brag a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
We'd love to have you join an upcoming Extreme Consulting Makeover session. These are always free, they're live, they're a lot of fun. Our team would love to host you over on Zoom. These happen Tuesdays at noon Eastern. Link in the show notes to register. Thank you for listening to Strategy Simplified. If you enjoyed, as always, please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends, tell your mom to listen. We'd love to get their ears here. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you again next week.